Hello everybody, so I'm here to talk about pen and ink, and this is a demonstration on how to use the tools and the different types of techniques because we want to create 3D shading and contrast in our pen and ink drawings. So what we're doing is we're going to create the illusion of 3D shading and textures more with lines and dots than we are with blending smoothly, because we're going to be using the pen holder. This is called a pen holder, and this is the actual pen, which they can come out and you can change them into different sizes. So put the pen back in the pen holder. Okay, and I'm going to talk about how to use this. I also have a quill, which is a smaller pen at the top, so this is for more fine and detailed work. And you can get pens that are wider and all different types of shapes. I have paper towel ready because the ink that we're using for pen and ink is permanent, so you want to be careful. And of course I have a little jar of ink, and I've got a tray that I'm going to keep it in so I can prevent from having spilling accidents, which we don't want to do. And we're going to be talking about the different techniques because you're going to be practicing. I have a drawing made on my paper. You can do little drawings of different things to try. This is your practice paper to get used to doing the different techniques. And this is a nice hard Bristol paper. It's not as porous, because if you use paper that's not as tightly woven, for example, if you use a computer paper or manila paper, it's just going to spread out like watercolor paint, soak it in, and we don't want that. So you can have a little drawing, and I'm going to talk about the different techniques. This is one little sample that I was working on. I got some textural lines, some directional lines, crosshatching, all kinds of good stuff. And this is another practice of the techniques. And this one's kind of more of a mishmash. I've got a cherry in there, fish, and this one was done with a bigger pen. You see the strokes are bigger. And what we're going to be talking about today is the different techniques. We'll be showing you this in a second, okay? All right, so let's put the camera down so we can see what the second's doing. Oops, come on, turn. And I'm tightening the wrong part. Here we go. All right, we want to get this on the paper. Okay, so let's talk about some of the different techniques. Now, I am left-handed, so what I want to do is I kind of want to work this way while I'm using the pen and ink because it will stay wet. So you want to kind of watch your smudging. I may be hopping around because I want to show you the different types of techniques. All right, the first one is called hatching, and that's strokes going one direction. Cross-hatching is when you do it the one direction and you cross back over, kind of like X's but not X's. Then you could have long lines, which can be curving and bending with your object, can be creating water in different shapes, and just straight long lines. You can also do short lines. Here's going this way, then curving out. What's great is because you're doing line work, you can make the different bends and turns. These ones are just straight one. If you're doing any animals with fur, you probably will have a lot of short lines to create that effect. And this one's got lines going little S's and curving because you can make them go any direction. This is directional lines, and you can see where it's curving, and then there's shorter ones and even shorter ones, and it's giving that illusion of 3D shading and bending. Now, stippling are little dots. And the closer the dots are together, the darker it gets. Now for this, you're actually making little dots. You don't want to hurt the pen. And this, the closer you get together, you have to be patient with stippling. And then of course we have textural effects, good for rocks, water areas. It's just different lines going in all different directions. And you want to be practicing all of these different techniques. So I'm going to get my paper ready. I'm going to carefully open the ink. Okay, so what I'm going to do to get the ink is I'm going to dip my pen, and you will be keeping this practice paper. You have to have ink in there to work. And when you have the practice paper, you can like test to make sure that the ink isn't going to splotch over. Now, this is the part that's sticking out. This is going under. The one that's caving under is facing down while you're working. Okay, so let's do some hatching. And hatching is lines going one way. And the closer together I get, the darker they get. So hatching, and these of course are short hatchings, are lines going in one direction. Now to create cross hatching, and cross hatching is good for making darker areas because then I'm going to go back over the opposite direction and it makes this kind of like little X's. Oops, and I've closed up my chart so I make sure I get all the different types. Okay. All right. And of course I can add lines inside here, give it the different shapes. All right. Okay, so long lines, I could be using those in the background to create the movement of the water. They're just lines that are long. And of course I can also add some textural effects in there as well, but that's basically what a long line is. Short lines are just lines that are short, and let's see, where can I do a fish? Short lines. Alright, here's some short lines going straight, and they also kind of look like hatching right now, right? And then I could do short lines. Little tiny short lines. Some medium lines. And I can add some hatching. Create a shadow with some cross hatching. Okay. All right. Directional lines, which are good if anything curvy. So directional lines can be long lines or short lines, and what they do is they're going to bend with the shape you want to create. And you notice I'm still going on that one dip, and I can make some medium curved lines then to look like it's got some shadow, because you do want to create contrast. And then I can do some even shorter directional lines. So basically directional lines will bend with your object. And when you're doing your real drawing with your pen and ink, you will just have a basic pencil drawing and use it as a guide, because most of the stuff's going to be added with the pen and ink. And then the further parts you put directional lines, the lighter they will appear. And of course, the closer together, the darker they'll appear. And what these basically do is they will create the direction the object's going. Like I can add some little curve to his face. So it looks like it's bending, and then of course I can some cross-hatching with the curve. It looks like my pen is starting to run out, so then I just take my inkwell and dip the pen. And you want to be careful that you know, with the ink, because if it tips over, that's why I have it in a tray. It makes a mess. It is permanent, so you want to be kind of careful with that. All right, and I can make some tiny directional lines to create the curve of his eye. And basically a directional line is just one that curves with your object. And of course cross-hatching can curve too. I'll just be doing directional lines the opposite direction to create the shadow. And you watch out, see I'm getting a little bit of ink there, so I'm gonna let that set before I go back into that area, because I don't want it to blurb. Right, stippling. Stippling is made with little dots, and basically you just make a dot with a pen, and the further away you are with your dots, the lighter they're going to appear, and the closer together they are, the darker it will appear. And stippling takes a bit of time, and I do have a drawing that's made completely of pen and ink stippling that I will show you, which I need to get out of my portfolio. And stippling is kind of a softer way of doing the blending than a lot of the line work. So if you want something to appear smooth, stippling is good. You just have to be really patient. And of course, the best way to learn these techniques is practicing. And you want to try a variety of them because you will need a variety on your project. And can you see how it's transitioning from light to dark? That is stippling. And of course, I love the next one, which is textural effects. I have a little more ink. And textural effects can be like making little directional lines where the core of the shadow is. Unfortunately, I don't have any fur on here. I can make things in the background, like it's good for like rocks and grass. Make lines that have more bends and turns and they look textural, because you do want to create contrast in the background too. You can have a mixture of straight lines in with it. Basically what textural will do, we'll add more layers and look more like it's busy. You know, like mountain rocks would be bumpy and groovy, water is moving. hair, rough surface of like bark of a tree. And what you want to do on this practice sheet is kind of get a feel for it. I use like a mixture of different techniques all over to create my highlights and shadows. But those are kind of the basics. Oh, I forgot to show you the quill. So I'm going to just rest my pen right here on the lid. So the quill is really tiny. So let's see the difference of what it does. Dip it in the ink. And let's do a little bit of here. Oh, and this buddy doesn't want to get going. I think somebody ruined this one. There he goes. All right, this one's got a little bit of a damaged tip. See how it's getting real thick? Let me see if I can get another one. This buddy needs a little help. You want to always check your tips and make sure they're good, unfortunately. Sometimes people don't use them well. And what was happening is, let me show you. I don't know if you can see it, but this one was, when I pressed it down, do you see how it's splitting? You don't want your pen to split like that. That means someone has pressed too hard. It's a delicate tool. You don't have to press, use pressure. Let's see if this works a little better. Okay, there we go. So it's all kind of on, you know, a preference, how you feel about it. And I'm not thinking this is drawing smaller. I'm almost thinking that my my bigger pen was doing smaller details. But you can get a feel for both. I would try it, see which one you prefer. I actually am preferring the bigger pen. This one is actually got a little, you want to watch out that if it's grabbing the paper, this is where I got too wet. And it could be that I had too much ink on there. So it's just a feel of getting used to these different tools and using textural lines and hatching and cross hatching and long and short to get the different values. And this is why we want to practice it. Now, when you're done, first thing you always want to do is to put the lid back on our ink, because we don't want any accidents. And if you do get some on your fingers, they'll be stained for a little while. I didn't today, but normally I do. If I kept going, I get it on my drawing hand. You want to go rinse these off and wash the pens with soapy water and then dry them, because what happens is we don't want these to get rusted and then they won't work real well. So wash them real well and dry them real well, otherwise the ink stays on there and it doesn't give the flow as nice after a while. And of course, this is why the pens are removable. They only last so long. So we will be practicing the different techniques. Hatching, cross hatching, long lines whether straight or curvy, short lines, directional lines, stippling, and textural effects. And you will kind of get a feel for the ones that you really like and want to use a lot. And which ones you don't want to use so much. Obviously, I love directional lines, hatching, cross hatching, textural lines. Depending on the picture, may do some stippling. Here's some stippling right here in this one. And that is pen and ink. And here's a sample of a cherry. See, it's bending and turning. You still want to create those bends and turns with your object, just like we would be 3D shading with a pencil, but now we're doing it with line and textural work. All right, okay, happy practicing.